So this month we have been talking about the comparison with Reiki and shamanism, spiritual locations, journey techniques. Today we are going to talk about spirit guides and a greater understanding of who they are, what they are, and then how we use Reiki to connect in, access them, and communicate with them, receive guidance from them. So, we're going to talk about all the different variations of spirit guides and just gain a greater understanding, maybe for you, of who you're working with, who you want to work with as spirit guides. Maybe for you, spirit guides are more color and frequency and universal energies or even sacred geometry, all different kinds of it and all different kinds of spirituality. So really even, I want to take out the word even. So spirituality does include people of all different belief systems in all the ways that they believe, just by different languages and different ways of being. So I know that people who are agnostic or atheist also have, maybe they don't term it a spiritual path, but there is an inner knowing quality with them equally as with anyone else. So anyway, we're going to talk about all that today. And so we're going to go into more information about spirit guides, spirit locations, how we use Reiki energy to access those and to understand them. And maybe you already practice multiple modalities and have different ways that you already access. So how you can even integrate it all together, have everything, working together, unified. And then talking about some of the spirit locations, we did that last week. Also, again, really vast. And so we're just hoping to give everybody a greater understanding of their relationship and your own inner way of thinking about it. It's one of the things that I love with Reiki in comparison to some other modalities is there is no requirement around your belief system about everything that I just said. Reiki will integrate with your belief system, take you deeper into what that is so that you have a greater relationship within yourself with, the world around you, the unseen world, the spiritual world, the spiritual locations. And then I also want to say that Reiki does not require you to engage with spiritual guides and spiritual locations at all. Like that may not be something that really interests you, or maybe you even feel as if, that can't happen for you. Well, first of all, getting to know all of it is a matter of interest. Reiki works regardless of your relationships in the spiritual realms. You can give Reiki, receive Reiki in all the ways that you do, and all of that is Reiki still doing the work, and it does the work the way it does the work. So, anyway, um, we're going to talk about all that, and I think what I will do is turn it over to you for a minute, Robyn, and talk about any announcements or anything, and then we'll go back to the subject.
Um,
Caught
oh,
you off guard.
yeah, well, our announcements are the same. We have classes coming up in October, and Colleen's teaching in Japan in November. And we have some other exciting things coming out soon that we will talk more about when that actually happens, as we've learned with our deadlines to be careful about our announcements with it. But also, I want to say that we are going to be opening Next Step for 2026 at the end of November. So I know that seems like a long ways away, and Colleen and I were just talking about time this morning and how weird it is right now. So I'm going to say it because that'll be here before we know it. So that'll be at the end of November. We'll talk more about that. I think that's all.
Okay. Probably the other thing I should announce sooner than later is William and I are teaching a 7-day Corona class in Hana, Hawaii in March of 2026. So it's probably not too early to make that announcement if anybody is thinking about something like that. It's a great class. All right. Impact driver. Okay. All right. Well, back to our topic then. We've done so much work with spiritual guides and locations and teachings really through all of our Reiki work. And, I had been in shamanic training for 3 years before I received Reiki, and then always worked with Reiki combined with shamanism. In my later years, and when Robyn and I really started to work together and we were guided to create our Next Step Reiki classes, it really brought in the awareness of how we are using Reiki energy to gain that access, relationship building, communications with our spiritual guides and spiritual locations. And it is, to me, it's always a part of Reiki. However, in the earlier years of Reiki in the 2000s, when I learned it, it wasn't very commonly taught. And I would say it was actively kind of like, oh, don't talk about those things. Don't, think about Reiki that way. But as a Reiki teacher, we have always noticed, and I have always seen way back when, that people start having these insights, experiences, um, psychic intuition, visions in different intuitive impressions on day one of a Reiki class. However, people don't know what that is and how it works for them. So a lot of times it takes it into, am I making this up? So, for instance, with spirit guides, a particular one show up for you. Am I making this up? Why would they be there for me? And all kinds of reasons we can have self-doubt around that connection with a spirit guide. So, we want to talk about it more in depth and kind of try to help with a greater understanding. So, what we did was really went into some comparisons to give an understanding. So last week we talked about how the differences in engaging in a Reiki journey, how to actually shift your consciousness into a journey state so that now the next step would be that you are going to meet spirit guides or you are going to invite a particular spirit guide. You don't have to wait for them to come to you. You can ask to be in relationship with the ones that of your choice. And so anyway, what we did was went through kind of a comparison of the different spiritual beings that people work with. So with Reiki spirit guides, what I find is they can come from all different traditions. So all of the different ways that I have experienced spiritual guides through my different engagement through shamanic practices and working in the spirit realms with Robyn's and hers and what we discuss and the 12 heavens class, all of that combined. So what we find with Reiki is that it will integrate with any of the other practices. Not all of the other practices want people to integrate Reiki with that practice. And so always we honor the tradition that we are working within. So some traditions ask you to just simply work within that tradition, work with those guides, stay focused with it. So I have been told in some of the native teachings that I have, Native American teachings that I have been taught, is because I carry what is called bear medicine. Bear of all different forms are in my spirit guides. So they are power animals, they are earth beings, part of kind of the state of who I am and how I walk in the world. And then also I engage with um, different kinds of bear spirit guides from upper world beings and shamanic traditions. Chakotka, the great bear of first creation, has been a guide of mine, once I met him, for, over 20 years. And then also working with the divine animal kingdom that we work with the Reiki energy that we met in our animal Reiki traditions. And so in that, the divine animal kingdom bear. None of it is hierarchical. All of it has different frequencies, different energies. So Reiki will combine with all of them. But when I was working with one particular teacher, she was teaching me that in her tradition, in Lakota traditions, in the way she was working with it and teaching it, was that if you were bear medicine, you would only ever work with that particular teaching and that particular tradition and with bear medicine exclusively. So I loved the teaching of that and I understand the teaching of it, but I also knew that that wasn't really a match for me. And so to honor that tradition, I did not continue with those teachings. So it's not a better than, it doesn't make it anything other than that is the tradition. And so in honoring of the different traditions, I knew that that wasn't one of my paths. So when we look at we talk about Reiki guides, they can be really anything. Um, they are naturally in the enlightened realms. So wherever you are meeting different guides, they're typically going to always be the higher frequency. Maybe even if they are what we call second heaven beings, or maybe middle world spirits in shamanic terminology, that you're still going to meet the highest frequency of all the different beings from whatever traditions that you are working in. So then when we think about shamanic spirit guides, there are different types that are common across the different shamanic traditions. However, even in the shamanic traditions, they may have different guides from one another. So, for instance, if you are in the shamanic Celtic traditions, you might be working more in the fairy realms with elemental beings, devas, often very earth-based trees, stone circles, for instance, natural landscapes. In the Native American traditions and all the different versions of that, because even in that they're different. So in the different nations, they are different. And the traditions of meeting them and how they work together can be different. But you may be more familiar with the idea of power animals, for instance. They are often very central to the medicine and the practice and how the healing practices are, who the spirit guides of the healing practices are. So power animals are considered to be enlightened beings. They are very earthy. They are very much of the earth, and they feel like the teachings of them and how they work with us is very embodied. It's very much about, that embodiment of also being an earth being as a human being. Also working with grandmothers and grandfathers as wisdom keepers. They are often the spirit guides and different kinds of ancestral beings. In this, I have worked with grandmothers and grandfathers in some of the traditions that have specifically come to me for particular people that I've worked with, but they don't always come to me for every session. And traditionally, those have been people who are in the native traditions or they are indigenous people. So then the grandmothers and grandfathers will come in. And it can be different than, say, your own ancestral grandmother or grandfather, because in this tradition, they are actually beings who have decided when they were human that they would go into the ancestral realms to help with the healing of the people. In another tradition, that would be called an ascended master or an ascended being. So it might be different than, say, if you are meeting your grandmother, like my mother, for instance, isn't really doing my healing work, but I can meet with her. And she can have some spiritual guidance and wisdom, but it's different than what I'm speaking of with the grandmothers and the grandfathers in these, more of the healing traditions. The same with the Peruvian traditions, African traditions. They're all working with different beings, like Pachamama for the Peruvian, the Earth Mother. Sacred animals might be the condor, the puma, and the serpent. And so then in African traditions are often the ancestors are the spirit guides of the African traditions, the different spiritual animals, more of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Nature forces, deities, that type of a thing. And then when we think about some of the Asian cultures and in Japanese, so in Shintoism, the spiritual guides are the kamis, the nature spirits, sacred presences of rivers and trees and mountains. And on Mount Kurama, they work with Sonten, the guardian deities, the uh, teachers of the mountains, Tengu, some of the cosmic energies. So Asian traditions of other kinds might include bodhisattvas. So different beings that we think of as bodhisattvas, maybe even also more like dragons they often show up, actually even for people that, I see them and that we see in our classes. Dragons often show up with Reiki also. And then we also have now where we are more aware of the spiritual guides of extraordinary reality. So we've talked about that. So how we expand in our daily life for the world immediately around us to be able to engage with the spiritual beings of the extraordinary reality around us. Now it's the same thing for me. They're not typically the beings that are doing my healing work, but I do enjoy engaging with them and communicating with them and being aware of their presence in my life, like the spirits of the trees that I'm walking with, the spirit of the water that I'm near, the river, the sound of the water dwellers in those spaces, um, the faces in the rock, the spirit in the rocks. So the clouds that will come through as different angels or spirit guides. So that awareness of the spiritual guides around you, we've termed extraordinary reality. And now one of the things that has shown up, I think, in my work over the last 10 years, an awareness, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And then, of course, what comes from ancient times are the awareness of the cosmic and galactic beings. So many people that are here incarnate identify themselves as a star seed. And they may have a deeper connection in the cosmic realms with the different guides of those realms, of where the guides of where they were before they were here on the earth. And so the galactic guides, not everybody has to be a starseed to work with galactic guides, but for instance, you may hear people now talking about, they're working with the Arcturians or the Pleiadians or the Syrians. They may be experiencing connection with galactic councils, harmonic beings, crystalline beings. So beings that are coming in from really very universal realms. And then we also have mystical beings that people engage with. So mystical beings can be everything from elemental beings. So for me, the elemental beings like the fairies, the divas, the elves, nature spirits, many people are working with Sasquatch energy, or like I'll hear people talk about working with giant energy. And I've always known about that, but I've never worked with them. And then wait until I will publish it. I just haven't had time. One of the rocks in Bandon that I've been talking about that show up, the spirits of the rocks really show up there. One of them is this giant in a rock, and you can clearly see him walking forward. So anyway, often I see them as a shift out of time, like the fairies are a shift out of time, and we can engage with them more clearly when we light our heart light so that they can see us as much as we see them, because they're really more in the physical realm, just kind of a shift. They're moved over a shift. And then you might have mythical teachers like dragons or unicorns, phoenixes, mermaids, different kinds of archetypes of wisdom and transformation. There can also be deep connections with celestial archetypes like the sun and the moon, star beings, um, different cosmic engagements. And then there are primordial beings, ancient presences. So I know it has really been coming in here in our invocations of the awareness of the wisdom of the ancient ones, of all of the earth, from the people, the animals, the trees, the waters, the stones, the the um, the presences of that wisdom and knowledge coming forward for us right now is really, really present. And I would say also that would include then the descendants, because, for myself anyway, I've really been connecting in with them. Now, again, there's a difference with all of these, that you may have a relationship with the different ones, but they may not be who you are working with for your Reiki work, your healing work, the different types of work that you may do, but you may want to know them. So I love being in the forest and engaging with the tree spirits and the nature beings, and I just spent that time at the beach doing that. And um, but I'm not actually asking them to come in and do my healing work in my sessions. So there's all different relationships, just like people, there's different relationships with people too, where, we all have different reasons for that relationship. And so again, really recognizing it's not hierarchical. And then we have religious beings. So talking about in who are, they may not be called spirit guides, so giving it a different relationship is or term of relationships with spiritual beings in the Christian tradition, for instance, might be Christ consciousness, God, Jesus, Mary, the Holy Spirit, different saints, archangels, and different beings in that way. In the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, you might be having guides that are bodhisattvas, Buddhas, deities like Kuan Yin, Tara, Ganesha, Shiva. And then in indigenous traditions, the kind of religious practice of it, that great spirit, earth mother, sky father, thunder beings, star beings. And in Islamic traditions, you might have angels and revered prophets. And then in Judaism, archangels, prophets, Shekinah. And in universal presence, we have God and Source, Creator, Divine Mother, Father, depending on the language of, for instance, in individual spiritual paths. I think one thing to realize that it took me a while to find this language with engaging with spiritual beings early on was the awareness that I'm not worshiping them. Maybe some you are actually worshiping them, but your guides are more relationships. Some of them will be part of just your perception of the world you live in. Others will provide guidance. Some of them may engage in your healing work with you. We're going to talk more about that next week, how all of this works in the actual healing traditions. So the next thing to think about with it is discernment. That's a big piece of working with spirit guides. Who are you working with? Where do they come from? What is their nature? How do you know you can believe them, trust them? And are they, number one, honoring your free will at all times? That's a kind of first quality. Well, no, actually, the first quality of knowing that you are working with compassionate beings, enlightened beings, is that they are love and compassion. They do not have judgment, and they do not have things like jealousy. So, for instance, none of my guides have jealousy that maybe, for instance, in my early years, I did work with fairies as part of my spiritual team that actually did the work, did my healing work. And I no longer work with them for that purpose, but I'm still in relationship with them, and they are not jealous that I really prefer to work with Reiki energy to do the same things that I was doing with them back in that day. They don't, spirit guides that are of a higher quality that you would want to be working with, they don't have things like, if you didn't show up and do your disciplines, they're not coming in. One of the things I heard about the distance symbol, one time somebody said that their teacher told them that if they drew it incorrectly, and that's a really big long one, that if they drew it incorrectly and drew one line incorrectly, that meant that they were calling the wrong phone number, and you never know who's on the other side of the phone. So that to me would right there be an indicator that, okay, that's not a frequency that I want to work within. I would only want to work with something that is going to welcome me in my humanness. It's like I might get one of those lines wrong, especially when I was first learning. So That would be an example that happened to be a Reiki example, but it would be the same kind of a thing with any of the guides, is they should not have those kind of lower frequency ego personalities and behaviors in order to work with you. In some of the traditions with some of the guides, like your ancestors, grandmothers, grandfathers, they may have a personality. In fact, they have personalities pretty commonly, but they're always and only working with your best interest. They also don't have those lower ego-based personality issues in order to work with you. Now, that's not saying you can't work with them. It's an understanding of, if you are going to work with spiritual guides, spiritual beings, how do you know who you're working with and what their qualities are and the source of guidance that you're receiving? Here's what Reiki energy does with all of it, and why I really like Reiki energy and how it does this work with us as people, because so much of this has been forgotten, and yet it is our normal human intellect to have an awareness and perception of this expanded reality of the universe that we live in, of the earth that we live on, of our daily life and the world around us. And in many of our cultures, these ideas have been suppressed, oppressed, and at the very easiest portion of that is that you're called weird for having these awarenesses. And I know growing up, I was definitely taught, probably more by my religion and kind of culturally created self-generation that I was born in than my family of origin. But, I was taught that we could pray to God, but we can't really get that information back for ourselves, that we would have to go to an intermediary to get that information. And that, you wouldn't really tell people you could talk to God, because that could lead to all kinds of problems and disbelief and cultural problems with it. But what we're seeing in today's world is there is a recognition that is happening with our authentic intellect that these do exist. It is real. Our world is so much more vast than just, what we can touch and feel and see right now and hear right now. It's so much deeper than that and bigger than that. And so what Reiki does is it helps with kind of restoring healing, and then restoring that part of you that is your authentic intellect to be able to expand your awareness. And then we're going to talk all through September about intuition, because intuition, imagination, and more, and instincts, etc., all of those are part of what Reiki brings back to you, so that you are operating with your full intellect. And how that applies to spirit guides is learning how it all works for you. So, for instance, some of you may see them, some of you may feel them, some of you may just know they're there, and in some cases they may not have an identity, or something that you can really, pinpoint. Oh, this is this being, this is this guide. It may be more of a feeling of an energy imprint, or a signature, an energy signature. And some of you may feel like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I've never had that experience, and none of it works for me that way. But Reiki energy helps you develop that. It helps you come in. It heals the areas where you've had limits to your belief system about this part of your intellect. And then it empowers it within you. And what I like about Reiki is it does that with the attunement, and it also does that for you and will help you find what your truth is. It doesn't have a specific belief system other than to take you deeper into your belief system. And so we do have commonalities of practices, and we have ways that we get together and we go deeper into these topics and traditions and understandings of them. It's what we do in our next step classes. That's what it's all about, is how do you access that, what is true for you, and what is the nature of what you're actually accessing. So, anyway, I was going to go more into the locations. We did do that a lot last week. I'll do some more of that. We can talk more about it next week, of understanding the spiritual locations, because it's the exact same thing. There are different spiritual locations according to the traditions, according to the perceptions of the people accessing those locations. And what happens with Reiki energy is it entrains you to your ability to access these higher frequencies of beings, of locations, in all the different ways that you may choose to do that. It can also help you with translation in communication. It can help you clarify your relationship with spirit guides and the discernment that you need to know what is this relationship, and your choice in the relationship, as well as the way the relationship comes to you. And I also like with Reiki that you can choose really how you want to work, as long as you are honoring the other traditions. You can work with Reiki in all the different ways of connection with the spirit realms. Really, the way I see it right now is, we are the people of today. We are the people of the 21st century. And 100 years from now, we will be known as the ancestors in the 21st century. And we are establishing these practices with a 21st century experience of them. And so the, part of what we are doing is bringing it all back, and also recognizing these are all abilities that we have. So I am going to go ahead and stop here so that Robyn can go into the journey with you and working with this with you. So